This is Penny Pasture Common. As I mentioned before, this was part of my local patch, although my local patch was at least 10 miles away from Warsaw, if I remember right. But it was a local patch that I bird watched for 17 years. And throughout the course of those 17 years, from 1997 onwards, I stood here quite a lot. But this was my secondary site. Primary site being Eakring Flash. That was always the first port of call, but after spending several hours at Eakring Flash, depending what was happening, then I would work my way down here, and this was always a good spot for migrant birds to drop in. This was the best spot for red start, and to be honest, it's probably one of the best spots in the county for red starts on passage. These hawthorns, these scattered mature hawthorns, have played host to many red starts and a range of other things. Used to get a lot of windchats here till windchats became extremely scarce. I remember having a party of 7 here once. There were some really good days on the whole, but there's one bird that always sticks in my mind. Penny Pasture Common could occasionally be really good for migration. It was usually on sort of September days when swallows would be streaming through, and swallows generally tend to go really, or come through really low. Occasionally they'll be higher, of course. Usually first thing in the morning, hirundines will be quite high up. As the day goes on, they fly at lower altitude. On one particular morning, I remember it had been relatively quiet for migration. I can't remember what year it was, but out of all the good birds that I had at Eakring at that time, I mean, there was numerous ospreys and red kites, and that was in the days when red kites were scarce. 10 a penny nowadays. But I had species like Richard's pipit and numerous ring ouzels, all really good passage birds, and rarities. The Richard's pipit was certainly a rarity, as was the Arctic skewer that came through Eakring Flash one morning. But the bird I probably remember perhaps most of all was a common bird, a very common bird. In fact, I've already mentioned the species, and it was a swallow. But what made this particularly eventful, and there actually was a rare bird, or a rare form, should I say, of a swallow, and it was a beautiful swallow that was completely cream coloured. It came through across here, and I was stood just down from here, and I was watching that way, straight north, because north is that way, and the birds were flying due south this particular morning. There hadn't been a lot of migration, and all of a sudden this small group of swallows came through, and there was about 4 or 5, might have been 6 possibly, and they flew right past me. And as they got closer, I realised one was completely cream. It was an absolute stonker of a bird. The only time I've ever seen such a bird. And it's one that I always remember, despite the number of rarities that I had here in the 17 years. I think it surprised many Notts bird watchers at the time, the stuff that I got here. This is just run-of-the-mill farmland with a couple of decent sites in it. They're only small sites, but it's like anywhere, it was always the amount of effort that was put into it. It was a place that I came to every day. You didn't always get the opportunity to come and check here every day. I tried to, but there were very few days in those 17 years when I didn't come to Eakring bird watching. And it's the same as anything. If you put the hours in, you eventually reap the rewards in terms of rarities. Stand in your garden long enough and you'll probably get all the commoner species of large raptor within a year quite easily nowadays. And that's it. People thought, oh, you know, you're really lucky. How can you keep getting this bird and that bird? It's all down to time and effort. I doubt if anyone will ever watch this place ever again. I'd be very surprised if anybody does. I'd be even more surprised because I don't think nowadays people would have the patience to watch a sight. It eventually got to me, the lack of birds. But it did take 17 years before I eventually stopped bird watching here. But by then, the invertebrates had really taken hold and taken over. But I still remember the days that I had at Eakring, getting up at first light and getting here for as soon as I could. Having a couple of hours or 2 or 3 hours before work. Having 2 or 3 hours or so after work, depending on what shift I was on. A lot of the time you could just turn up and there wouldn't be anything. But then, maybe that one time in 20, you dropped on something lucky. That's the joys of having a hobby such as bird watching or invertebrates and having a local patch or a study area. The more effort you'll put in, you'll certainly get far more out than someone that just turns up every once in a while or once every Sunday. You need some kind of interest. Keeps you going and keeps you sane. It's nice to be able to look out for things certain times of the year. This time of year was all about, well, it's the build up to meadowpipit migration and hirundine migration. By God, some fabulous days bird watching can be had recording birds on visible migration. It beats your rarity chasing, hands down. There's nothing to compare it. There's some great days to be had, even whether you're on the coast or in a landlocked county like Nottinghamshire. So I wonder how many more cream-coloured swallows will drift through here. I doubt whether there'll be any more, to be honest. But I won't be here to see them. My bird watching days are done.